The second my mother found out about my income, I became her personal bank. After 22 years of silence, she appeared at my door with my spoiled half-brother, his hand already out. She demanded a fortune I had earned through sweat and tears while she abandoned me. But they had no idea how hard I would fight back to protect the life I built. My name is Elena Reyes, and at 31, I've finally learned to breathe. My life now is measured in clean lines and predictable outcomes. I live in a high-rise apartment in Austin, Texas, where the sunset floods my living room, catching the glass panels of my standing desk. I am a senior software engineer at a top-tier tech firm. I debug complex systems, I find the flaw, I fix it, I move on. My salary is more than my father made in a decade at his garage. My world is orderly, it is safe. It is everything my childhood was not. My childhood was in Michigan. It was a chaotic scramble, defined by the greasy chill of my father's auto shop, and the echoing silence left behind by my mother, Sylvia Kent. She walked out when I was 9, vanishing from my life like a wisp of smoke, leaving only the wreckage of a broken marriage and mounting debt for my father, Marcus Reyes, and me to navigate. I fought my way out with scholarships and code. I thought I had debugged that part of my past, archived it, left it behind. But some bugs aren't bugs. They're dormant features. One humid Tuesday evening in autumn, everything changed. I was unwinding from a 14-hour crunch cycle, the skyline of Austin a tapestry of neon outside my window. I was debating between takeout and cooking when the knock came. It wasn't the sharp rap of a delivery driver. It was hesitant, then firm, almost familiar. I opened the door, and the sterile, climate-controlled air of my hallway was instantly invaded by the faint, cloying scent of stale perfume. Standing before me was a ghost, my mother, Sylvia Kent. I hadn't seen her face in person in 22 years. She looked smaller, time had etched lines around her eyes. But she wore the same strained bright smile I remembered from the few photographs Dad hadn't thrown away. She was dressed just slightly too young for her age, her jewelry cheap but loud. Beside her, slouched against the doorframe, was a young man I'd never seen. He was tall, pale, and looked utterly bored, his eyes glued to his phone, earbuds dangling. He reeked of entitlement. "Elena?" Sylvia breathed, as if testing my name. Her eyes weren't looking at my face. They were darting past me, scanning the sleek, minimalist interior of my home. I saw her pupils dilate slightly as they registered the view. The expensive furniture, the high-end tech on my shelves. "Mom?" The word felt foreign and rough in my throat. "Oh, my sweet girl." She lunged forward, pulling me into an awkward hug I didn't return. Her embrace felt cold. "It's been too long. This is your brother, Leo." "Say hello, Leo." Leo didn't look up. He grunted, "Sup," and pushed past me into the apartment, immediately sprawling onto my designer sofa, his dirty sneakers propped up on the white upholstery. I was frozen, my mind racing. This wasn't a reunion. This was an invasion. Sylvia followed him in, her hands clasped together. "Elena, I know this is a shock, but we're family. I heard you were doing so well. A big job, good money." And there it was. Not "how are you?" Not "I missed you." But good money. She leaned closer, her smile tightening. "Look, I'll be direct. Leo is starting a new chapter. He has this wonderful business idea. A startup, you know." Leo scoffed from the couch. "It's an influencer brand?" "Yes," Sylvia continued, ignoring him. "And he just needs a little seed money to get it off the ground. We were thinking, well, his tuition at the community college is a waste. He needs $50,000 for equipment and branding." I stared at her, speechless. The audacity was suffocating. "And," she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "while we get settled here in Austin, we just need a little support. Maybe $2,500 a month? Just to keep us afloat. For family." The word family hit me like a physical blow. Their demands, bold, shameless, and dripping with entitlement, weren't just about money. This was a hostile takeover. This was a betrayal deeper than the one I'd spent my whole life trying to recover from. How far would they go? What secrets had brought them here? I was about to find out, and it would test every wall I'd ever built. I never thought my mother would find me because of the money I make. I thought if she ever found me, it would be because she missed me. What a fool I was. Growing up in Michigan wasn't just cold. It was a specific kind of gray. My life was defined by the smell of motor oil and the constant clicking sound of my father's adding machine in the tiny freezing office of his auto shop, Reyes and Son. The irony was, there was no son. Just me, a 9-year-old girl trying to stay warm by the space heater, doing her homework. My dad, Marcus Reyes, was a good man, but a broken one. Sylvia's departure had hollowed him out. The night she left is burned into my memory. I was in my pajamas, watching cartoons. I heard them arguing in the kitchen, their voices low and sharp. Then, silence. I saw her walk down the hall, pulling a single blue hard-shell suitcase. She didn't look at me. She didn't say goodbye. She just opened the front door and walked out into the falling snow. I remember my dad slumping against the doorframe, his shoulders shaking, before he slowly turned and saw me watching. He didn't say anything. He just went and made me a grilled cheese sandwich, and we ate in silence. She didn't just leave. She vanished. Years later, I pieced it together. She'd fallen for a man who managed a chain of electronic stores, someone who promised her a life without grease under her fingernails. They moved across the state. She had Leo, and she never looked back. Her only contact was a yearly birthday card. It was always the same generic floral design. Inside, she'd write, in neat, impersonal cursive, "Happy birthday, Elena, hope you are well." And she'd sign it, S. Not Mom, not Love Mom, just S. Those cards stung more than silence ever could. They were proof I was an obligation, an afterthought. Dad poured everything into the shop. He worked from dawn until long after midnight, his hands permanently stained black, his knuckles split and bleeding in the winter. The shop barely broke even. I remember days when he'd come home with less than $50 in the cash box, his face grim. "Tough month, mija," he'd say, forcing a smile. Rent was always late. The fridge was a barren landscape. I knew what real hunger felt like. At 13, I couldn't watch him struggle alone. I started working. I tutored kids in math. My textbooks spread open next to theirs. I got a job as a barista at the local coffee shop, learning to steam milk and hide my exhaustion behind a fake smile. On weekends, I'd clean houses for cash. Every dollar went to Dad. "For the electric bill," I'd say, shoving the cash into his shirt pocket. "Elena, no," he'd protest, his voice thick. "You should be a kid. You shouldn't be worrying about this." "We're a team, Dad," I'd insist. It was my way of fighting back. It was my way of building a wall where my mother had left a gaping hole. School was my true escape. I'd stay late for the programming club, the clean, cold logic of code a welcome antidote to the messy chaos of my life. I'd lose myself for hours, turning abstract problems into elegant solutions. Dad would sit with me at our worn-out kitchen table, half asleep but present. "You're too smart, mija," he'd murmur, his pride a warm blanket. "You're going to do anything you want. You're stronger than this. You're stronger than her." His words were my fuel. But Mom's absence was a constant, dull ache. I'd look at the one photo of her I'd saved, hidden in my math textbook. Why wasn't I enough? Why didn't she want me? By high school, I'd learned to depend on no one but myself and my father. I saved every penny I didn't give him. I studied until my eyes burned. I vowed I would never, ever be weak enough to need someone who didn't want me. The vow I'd made to myself in Michigan became my armor. I'd learned to depend on no one but myself and my father. His quiet strength was my anchor. But I knew he couldn't carry us forever. I had to build my own path, forged in steel and logic. My path out wasn't just education. It was an obsession. I buried myself in my studies, finding a solace in the rigid, predictable world of math and science that my emotional life so desperately lacked. While other kids were discovering parties, I was discovering data structures. My high school guidance counselor, a weary woman named Mrs. Petrov, saw a grit in me that startled her. She pointed me towards scholarships. Not just the local ones, but the national ones. The ones for women in STEM. The ones for first-generation college students from low-income families. I applied for every single one. At 17, I won the jackpot, a full ride to a state university for software engineering. The acceptance letter didn't just feel like a ticket out. It felt like a validation of my entire existence. It was proof that S was wrong, I was enough. But even with tuition covered, I was on my own for everything else. Books, rent, food. There was no cushion. To survive, I worked multiple grueling jobs. I was a barista at the campus coffee shop, my shifts starting at 5 a.m. I still remember the acidic smell of stale coffee grounds and the burn of the steam wand on my fingers. I'd memorize algorithms while wiping down tables. On weekends, I was an office assistant at a small law firm, a mind-numbing job of filing dusty documents and answering phones. And late nights, after my classes and my library shifts, I cleaned offices, pushing a vacuum in empty buildings, my arms burning, my mind debugging code from my afternoon lecture. My schedule was a relentless, joyless loop. Wake, work, class, study, work, sleep. I saw other students laughing, going to football games. I felt like a ghost haunting the campus, present but not participating. I lived on instant ramen and sheer, unadulterated spite, a desperate promise to myself that I would never be in a position where I had to depend on anyone else for my survival. College was a grind, but it shaped me. By graduation, I had a degree with high honors, a stack of awards, and a job offer from a prestigious tech company in Austin, Texas. The day I moved to Austin felt like stepping onto another planet. The gray, oppressive skies of Michigan were replaced by a vast, blindingly blue Texas sun. The energy was different. It was a city of innovators, of people building the future. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged. I started as a junior engineer, just another face in a sea of ambitious graduates. But I wasn't just ambitious. I was starving. I poured everything I had into my work. I took the projects no one else wanted. I stayed late. Not because I was told to, but because the complex logic of a failing system was a puzzle I needed to solve. Within 5 years, I'd climbed to a senior role. I was leading my own team. I had a salary that felt like a typo, a modern apartment downtown, and the respect of my peers. With my first real paycheck, I never forgot my father. I set up an automatic monthly transfer to his bank account. $700. I called him the day the first one went through. "Dad, check your account." I heard him fumbling with his old computer. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Elena. Mija. What is this? This is too much." It's not," I said, my voice thick. "For the leaky roof. For all those times you went without." He was silent for a long moment, and I heard him quietly weeping. "I'm so proud of you, Elena," he finally managed. You built this. You did this." His pride was my greatest achievement. It was the validation I'd craved my entire life. Mom, though, was a different story. The S-cards kept coming, somehow finding my new address in Austin. "Happy birthday. Hope you are well. S." The words were sharp and hollow. They were a cold reminder, arriving in my sleek modern mailbox, a piece of unwanted, unresolved code from a deprecated program. They stirred up old pain, questions I'd tried to bury. But I was successful now. I was safe. I'd proven I didn't need her. I thought I had finally, truly, closed the door on that part of my past. I was wrong. I stood in my own doorway, the world narrowing to a pinpoint. The polite, sterile air of my apartment felt instantly contaminated. Sylvia's voice, $2,500 a month, just to keep us afloat, echoed in my ears, sounding less like a request and more like an invoice. My mind, the one trained to debug systems, was frantically trying to process the variables. Sylvia, Leo. $50,000, $2,500, MO. Error. Error. Does not compute. You can't be serious. I finally managed to say. My voice sounded small, like a stranger's. Sylvia's practiced smile wavered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. She tried to cover it, putting a hand to her chest in mock offense. Elena, darling, is that how you greet your mother, after 22 years? I've missed you so much. You're demanding $50,000, I said, the words tasting like ash. From my white linen sofa, Leo scoffed. He didn't even look up from his phone. Yo, this Wi-Fi is slow as hell. What's the password? The sheer, staggering arrogance of it broke my paralysis. I felt a cold surge of anger. Get your feet off my couch. Leo's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise, as if I'd just spoken in a different language. Chill. It's just a couch. It's my couch, the one I paid for, I snapped. Sylvia immediately jumped in, playing peacemaker, her voice dripping with fake honey. Leo, honey, be nice. Elena, darling, don't be like that. We're in a tough spot. And you're doing so well. We're family. Family helps family, right? Family? I repeated. The word felt absurd. Where was this family when Dad was working 80-hour weeks at the shop to keep us from being evicted? Where was family when I was working 3 jobs in college just to eat? Sylvia's face hardened. The mask was slipping. I see. You're still holding on to that. I knew Marcus would poison you against me. Dad didn't have to say a word. I shot back. Your absence said everything. The only thing I ever got from you was a card signed S. She actually flinched. I had hit a nerve, but she recovered quickly. Her eyes darting around my apartment again, cataloging my possessions. Well, you clearly landed on your feet. You've got so much now, all this. She gestured vaguely at my life. It's not fair that you have all this, and your own brother has nothing. He's not my brother, I said, my voice low and steady. And what I have, I earned. I didn't abandon anyone to get it. This place is kinda small anyway, Leo muttered, his gaze sweeping my open-plan living room with disdain. I saw the penthouses online. For someone making bank like you could do way better. His words sent a chill down my spine. I saw the penthouses online. They hadn't just found me. They had researched me. How did you find me? I demanded. Sylvia waved her hand dismissively, trying to look casual. Oh, you know, old friends. People talk. We heard you were in tech. It wasn't hard. Her vagueness was a lie. I could smell it. It set off alarms in my head. I took a deep breath. The engineer in me taking over, shutting down the emotional panic. I needed control. I needed them out. I can't talk about this right now, I said, my voice firm and cold. You showed up unannounced after 2 decades and started demanding money. This isn't a reunion. It's a shakedown. You need to leave. Sylvia's smile vanished completely. Her eyes turned to ice. After we came all this way? Elena, don't be selfish. We just need, I said, leave. I pointed to the door. Leo finally stood up, stretching as if he were bored. Whatever, this place is weak anyway. Come on, Mom. She's not gonna help. We're not done, Elena, Sylvia hissed, her voice no longer warm, but sharp and threatening. She grabbed her purse. She tried to pull me into one last hug. A final attempt at manipulation. I stepped back, crossing my arms, her face twisted with frustration. She and Leo walked out, and I slammed the door behind them, my hands shaking. I immediately twisted the deadbolt, the click echoing in the sudden heavy silence. I leaned against the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. My safe space, the life I had meticulously built to be impenetrable, had just been violated, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, this was only the beginning. The following morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Sylvia. "I'm so sorry about yesterday." Leo was out of line. "Please, let me apologize. Just coffee. I promise." A part of me, the engineer, screamed that it was a trap. It was an inefficient use of resources, a predictable vulnerability, but another part, the 9-year-old girl I thought I'd buried, whispered, What if she's really sorry?" I hated myself for that flicker of hope, but it was there. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them at a busy cafe downtown, a neutral territory where they couldn't cause a scene. I arrived first, choosing a table in the corner with a clear view of the exits. Threat assessment. I felt powerful in my world of code, but the moment they walked in, I felt myself shrink. Sylvia had her concerned mother face on. Leo slouched behind her, his expression sullen and impatient. "Elena, thank you for coming," Sylvia began, her voice trembling with manufactured sincerity as she slid into the booth. She reached for my hand across the table. I instinctively pulled it back, wrapping my fingers around my coffee cup. She didn't miss a beat. She launched into a prepared monologue, her eyes welling with crocodile tears. "Darling, I know what you must think of me, but you don't know the whole story. You can't know." I stayed silent, my posture rigid. I was a system waiting for an input. "Your father, Marcus," she sighed, shaking her head. "He made it impossible for me to stay in touch. After I left, I realized I'd made a mistake. I tried to call. I wrote letters. He shut me out. Elena, he told me you didn't want to see me. He poisoned you against me, kept you all to himself." The lie was so audacious, so complete, that for a moment I was stunned. My mind flashed back to my 10th birthday, my 11th, my 12th, my father leaving hopeful, desperate messages on her disconnected answering machine. I remembered him sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands, after another returned letter. "That's a lie," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "It's not!" she insisted, her voice rising. "He couldn't stand that I'd found happiness. He wanted to punish me. So he used you." "I tried, Elena. I really did." She painted herself as the victim, a desperate mother locked away from her child, all while I knew she had been starting a new family, a new life, without a single backward glance. Before I could respond, Leo, who had been aggressively scrolling through his phone, slammed it on the table. Yeah, tragic story. So are you gonna pay or what?" "I'm not getting any younger here." I stared at him. "Pay for what?" "For her lies? For my startup?" he snapped, as if I were an idiot. "And that $50K is just for the branding and the equipment. I'm still gonna need a ride. I can't be an influencer taking the bus." Sylvia chimed in, her brief sadness forgotten. "He's right. He needs something respectable to get around campus, to meet clients. Something safe. Maybe a nice SUV? Even a used Escalade would do." I felt a hysterical laugh bubbling in my chest. "A used Escalade. And a new gaming rig," Leo added, pointing a thumb at his own phone. "This laptop is trash. I can't edit video on this." The sheer, layered absurdity of their demands. $50,000, $2,500 a month, an SUV, and a high-end computer built on a foundation of grotesque lies about the one man who had sacrificed everything for me. The engineer in me went offline, and the daughter took over. "He begged you to call," I said, my voice shaking with a sudden cold fury. I waited by the phone. Every single birthday, I checked the mail every day for years, hoping for something more than just S. "Don't you dare sit here and blame him for what you did." The cafe had grown quiet. People were staring. Sylvia's face hardened. the mask of the victim shattering. "You're so selfish," she spat, her voice low and venomous. "Just like him. I gave you life, and this is how you repay me? Hiding your money like a little dragon? Figures!" Leo scoffed, leaning back. "Dad was right about you. He said you'd be a stuck-up, cold-hearted bitch. That was it. I was done." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly on the tile floor. I pulled a $20 bill from my wallet and threw it on the table. "For the coffee. I'm done here. I don't owe you anything. Stay away from me. And stay away from my father." I turned to leave. Sylvia lunged across the table and grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "You'll regret this, Elena," she hissed, her face twisted with frustration. I ripped my arm from her grasp. "No," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "You regretted this 22 years too late." I walked out of the cafe, my whole body trembling. I was furious, not just at them, but at myself. Furious that for even 1 second, I had let that stupid, 9-year-old hope back in. I went home, but my apartment no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a target. I tried to work, to lose myself in the comforting logic of my code, but the lines just blurred. My focus was shattered. I felt violated, angry, and exposed. I kept thinking about Sylvia's final words. "You'll regret this." It wasn't a plea, it was a threat. I paced my living room, debating whether to call my dad. I didn't want to worry him. He was proud of me. I didn't want him to know that the monster from his past had returned to haunt mine. I'd handle it myself. That afternoon my apartment buzzer rang, the sharp electronic sound making me jump. I checked the camera. It was them, Sylvia and Leo, standing in my building's lobby, looking up at the camera. I ignored it. The buzzer rang again. And again. A relentless, insistent pressure. BZZZZT. 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 Then. A pause. My phone lit up. A text from Sylvia. "Elena, please. I know you're there. I'm sorry. Leo is just upset. Let us just talk for 5 minutes. We will leave, I promise. Please don't make a scene in your fancy building." The veiled threat about my neighbors worked. The last thing I needed was a public confrontation in the hallway. Cursing myself, I buzzed them in, my heart pounding a sick rhythm against my ribs. I opened the door just a crack, my body blocking the entrance. 5 minutes. Then you're leaving. Sylvia pushed past me, dragging Leo in behind her. She was all smiles again, but her eyes were sharp, darting around. "Oh, thank you, darling. You're so forgiving." Leo just grunted and slumped onto the couch, immediately pulling out his phone. "So," Sylvia began, her tone overly bright as she perched on the edge of my armchair. "This job of yours, it's all computers, right? Just typing all day? It sounds so complicated. How much does someone even earn doing that to afford a place like this?" Her questions were too pointed, too specific. She was fishing. "It's a good job," I said, keeping my answers vague. My arms crossed. "My 5 minutes are starting." Right, she said. I'm thirsty. Could I trouble you for a glass of water, darling?" It was a classic distraction tactic. I knew it. But I was on edge. And I just wanted them gone. Fine. I turned my back for no more than 10 seconds. I went to my kitchen, grabbed a glass, and filled it from the dispenser. The sound of the water filling the glass was loud in the tense silence. When I turned back, my blood ran cold. Leo was not on the couch. He was at my desk, my workstation, my command center. He was sitting in my ergonomic chair, his hands on my keyboard, staring at my triple monitor setup. My computer, which I had left on a locked screen, was now active. He was trying to guess my password. "Get away from my desk!" I roared. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. Leo jumped back, startled, but then he smirked. "Just checking it out. Nice rig. Bet you have all your bank stuff bookmarked on here, right?" For easy access? We were just curious, Elena. Sylvia rushed in, her voice defensive. You have all these fancy things. Why are you so secretive with your own family? You are not my family. I yelled, my hands shaking. You don't touch my things. My mind was racing. How did they find me? How did they know my income? How did they know which building? The old friend's excuse was a lie. It had to be. My training as an engineer took over. I analyzed the breach. I shoved past Leo, sat at my desk, and my fingers flew across the keyboard. What did you do? Nothing, chill, he said. I ignored him. I opened my email. I didn't know what I was looking for, just an anomaly. Something out of place. And then I saw it. In my spam folder, an email forwarded from my father's email account, sent 2 months ago to a bizarre, unfamiliar Gmail address. My heart stopped. I clicked it. The subject line was, Ray, Elena. So proud. It was a forwarded email chain. The unfamiliar address, which I now knew was Sylvia's, had first emailed my dad, posing as an old high school acquaintance. Hey Marcus, ran into an old friend who said your daughter Elena is a big shot programmer now. That's amazing. We're so proud of our Michigan kids. Where's she working? And my dad, my trusting, proud father, had replied, Hi, yes, she's our star. She's a senior engineer at company name in Austin. Making us all so proud. She lives in a beautiful apartment downtown. Sylvia hadn't heard about my income. She hadn't run into old friends. She had socially engineered my father. She had hacked him, using his love for me as a weapon. I slowly turned my monitor so they could both see the email chain. You hacked my father's email, I said, my voice dead, all the emotion drained away, replaced by a cold, sharp certainty. Sylvia's fake smile evaporated. The mask didn't just slip. It shattered. Her face contorted into a snarl I'd never seen before. Your father is a failure. She spat. All pretense gone. He was always a failure. Stuck in that pathetic, greasy garage, wallowing in his own misery. I had to know if you'd turned out like him or if you'd actually made something of yourself. Yeah, Leo chimed in, his voice dripping with malice. He's a loser. At least you got out. You're better than him. Their cruelty, their sheer venom, ignited something in me. I stood up slowly. I picked up my phone. Get out, I said. What? Sylvia sneered. I'm dialing 911. You have 10 seconds to get out of my apartment before I report you for trespassing and identity theft. Sylvia's eyes widened. A flash of genuine fear. You wouldn't. You'd call the cops on your own mother? You stopped being my mother 22 years ago, I said, my thumb hovering over the call button. You're just a con artist. 10, 9, 8. You're making a huge mistake, Elena, Sylvia shrieked, grabbing Leo's arm and yanking him toward the door. We're not done. This isn't over. They stormed out, slamming the door behind them. I locked the deadbolt. My knees buckling. I sank to the floor, my back against the door, my entire body trembling. I sat there for a long time, amid the broken glass and water. Then, the analyst took over again. I got up. I went to my computer. I checked my bank's website logs, multiple failed login attempts from an IP address I didn't recognize. From that morning, while I was at the cafe, they hadn't just been probing, they had been actively trying to steal from me. This wasn't a family dispute. This was a crime. I sat on the floor amid the shards of glass for a long time, the adrenaline slowly draining away, leaving behind a cold, toxic residue. The attack was no longer emotional. It was digital. It was a system breach. And in this world, I was the expert. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was rage. A cold, precise engineering rage. They had used my father's love as a security vulnerability. They had tried to exploit my life's work. They had underestimated me. I didn't clean up the glass. I walked, barefoot, to my desk. I sat down and With methodical precision, I began to build my fortress. First, I documented everything. I took screenshots of the failed login attempts. I saved the email chain. I photographed the text messages from Sylvia. I was building a case file. Second, I had to make the hardest call. I picked up my phone and dialed my father. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. Elena. Mija. How's my star engineer? His voice, so full of pride, broke my heart. I had to tell him that his pride had been weaponized. Dad, I started, and my voice cracked. Instantly, his tone changed. Elena, what's wrong? Are you okay? Dad, did you get an email a few months ago from someone? An old school friend? Asking about me? He was silent for a long moment. Oh, yeah, I think so. A woman. Said she was from my graduating class. Why? She seemed so nice. I was just so proud, Mija. I told her all about your job. I closed my eyes, the tears finally coming, hot and angry. Dad? That wasn't an old friend. That was Sylvia. She used that information to find me. She was here, Dad. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, suffocating. When he spoke, his voice was a low growl I had never heard before. What did she want? Money? I said, my voice flat. $50,000 and $2,500 a month, that. He couldn't even finish the sentence. I heard him slam his fist on his desk at the shop. That woman. She tried to get into my email too. My password was changed a few weeks ago. I thought it was just spam, a glitch. I felt so foolish. She locked me out of my own accounts. Elena, you listen to me. You don't give her a dime. You don't give her a second of your time. She is not your mother. She is nothing to us. Do you understand me? I understand, Dad, I whispered. Lock everything down, Elena. Everything. Don't be like me. Don't be so trusting. We hung up, and I felt a new, hard resolve settle in my chest. He was right. This wasn't about family. This was about security. My next call wasn't emotional. It was strategic. I spent an hour researching the top digital privacy and harassment attorneys in Austin. I found one. Sarah Jenkins, a name synonymous with high-profile tech litigation and cyber-stalking cases. Her office was sleek and minimalist, much like my own apartment. Sarah Jenkins herself was sharp, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, her eyes missing nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I laid out my evidence on her conference table like I was presenting a post-mortem on a failed system. Exhibit A, the social engineering attack on my father. Here is the forwarded email chain. Exhibit B, the demands for money. Here are the time-stamped text messages. Exhibit C, the escalation. Here are the server logs from my bank, showing multiple failed login attempts from a public IP address, time-stamped to the exact time they were in my apartment. Sarah Jenkins leaned back, her expression unreadable. She steepled her fingers. Miss Reyes, you've done half my job for me. Most of my clients come in with tears and feelings. You've come in with a data log. This is a system breach, I said. I need a firewall. And we will build one, she said, a small grim smile on her face. This isn't a family dispute. This is attempted wire fraud, identity theft, and aggravated harassment. We're not going to send a polite letter. We're going to file for a permanent restraining order. A judge will grant a temporary one this afternoon based on this evidence, and we'll have them served by sundown. What do they have to do? They will be legally barred from contacting you, your father, or your place of work. They cannot come within 500 yards of you or this building. If they so much as text you, hello, they are in contempt of court and will be arrested. I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees. It was a clear, logical, enforceable rule. It was a line of code they could not cross. The legal process was swift. As Sarah predicted, the judge granted the temporary restraining order immediately. A server handed Sylvia and Leo the papers at the cheap motel they were staying at. The hearing for the permanent order was set for 2 weeks later. Those 2 weeks were the quietest of my life. There were no texts, no calls, no buzzes at my door. The silence was deafening. It felt wrong, too easy. My father called every night, and I reassured him that the legal system was working. But my engineer's brain kept telling me, this is not resolved. The bug has not been patched. It's just dormant. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse with Sarah Jenkins. I was in a sharp blazer, my hair pulled back. I felt like I was going to a project pitch, not a family court. And then I saw them. They were sitting on a bench, and the transformation was shocking. Sylvia's mask of the affluent wronged woman was gone. She looked cheap, her hair a mess, her eyes darting around with a nervous, feral energy. Leo was slouched beside her, his face pale and angry, vibrating with a sullen rage. In the courtroom, Sylvia tried to put on her show for the judge. "Your Honor," she began, her voice cracking. "I'm just a mother. I just want to see my daughter. I lost her once, and her father. He's poisoned her against me. She's so successful, so rich, and she won't even help her poor, struggling family. It was a good performance. But this wasn't a soap opera. This was court." "Miss Kent," Sarah Jenkins said, her voice cutting through the air like glass. "Are you struggling because you spent the money you got from your last settlement? Or are you struggling because your son refuses to get a job?" Leo shot up. "You shut your..." "Mr. Kent, sit down and be silent, or I will have you removed for contempt," the judge snapped, his eyes flashing. Leo, shocked, fell back into his seat. Sarah Jenkins turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, this isn't about a family reunion. This is about a pattern of predatory behavior. Miss Kent and her son are here for one reason: money. And they will stop at nothing to get it. She didn't use emotion, she used my data. Exhibit A. An email chain proving Miss Kent used a false identity to defraud the petitioner's father for information. Exhibit B. Text messages demanding, not asking for $50,000 and a monthly stipend. Exhibit C, Sarah said, pausing for effect. Server logs from the petitioner's bank, showing a brute force login attempt. This isn't a mother, this is a con artist. The judge had heard enough. He granted the permanent restraining order. Sylvia let out a small, strangled shriek. Leo just stared at me. His eyes filled with a pure, unfiltered hatred that chilled me to the bone. "This order is permanent," the judge declared. "You will stay away from Miss Reyes. If you violate this, you will go to jail. We are done here." I walked out of the courtroom, feeling nothing. Not relief. Not victory. Just empty. That feeling lasted for 3 days. I was at work, in the middle of a high-pressure sprint meeting. My team was whiteboarding a complex problem. My phone, face down on the conference table, buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. A frantic rhythmic pulsing. My team lead paused. "Elena, you need to get that?" "No, it's fine," I said. But my heart was pounding. It buzzed again. I flipped it over. My screen was filled with alerts. Chase Bank. A transfer of $15,000 to a new account. Act number 9012 has been requested. To approve, please enter code 449102. Chase Bank. A transfer of $15,000 to a new account. Act number 9012 has been requested. To approve, please enter code 881203. Chase Bank. A transfer of $15,000 to a new account. Act number 9012 has been requested. To approve, please enter code 512297. My blood turned to ice. They weren't just guessing. They were in. They must have compromised my password from another, older data breach, and were now hammering my two-factor authentication, hoping I'd accidentally approve it. I have to take this, I stammered, grabbing my phone and sprinting from the room. I ran to the nearest stairwell, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called the bank's fraud department. "This is Elena Reyes," I said, my voice high and tight. "My accounts are under active attack, right now. They are trying to transfer $15,000. Lock my accounts. Lock everything." The agent on the other end was calm. "One moment, Miss Reyes. I see the attempts. They are originating from a public library terminal in Austin. We are locking the account now. The transfer has failed." I slid down the stairwell wall, my legs giving out. They hadn't just tried to ask. They hadn't just tried to guess. They had actively, with malice, tried to steal my life savings. The restraining order hadn't scared them. It had just made them desperate. I sat there, in the cold concrete stairwell, and I finally understood. This was never going to end until I ended it. I took a deep breath, my engineer's mind clicking back into place. They had made a mistake. They had left a digital footprint. I called Sarah Jenkins. "Sarah, it's Elena. They just violated the order. And they just committed attempted wire fraud. I have the bank logs, I have the proof." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Elena, they are incredibly stupid. This is no longer a civil matter. This is a criminal case. Are you ready to press charges?" "Yes," I said, my voice void of all emotion. "Yes, I am." The call to Sarah Jenkins was the final line of code in a program I had been writing my whole life. Pressing criminal charges was no longer an emotional decision. It was a logical necessity. It was the only way to patch the vulnerability, to debug the system. Sarah was, as ever, lethally efficient. The bank's fraud department, now fully cooperative, provided the logs from the library terminal, security camera footage from the library, obtained via a subpoena, clearly showed Sylvia and Leo hunched over a public computer at the exact time of the attempted transfer. Combined with the violation of the permanent restraining order, the case was airtight. The police arrested them at their motel that same evening. The fallout was immediate and seismic. Word of their arrest for attempted fraud and harassment spread like wildfire through what was left of Sylvia's social circle. The story was just too sordid, too dramatic to ignore. The abandoned daughter, the rags to riches tech success, and the greedy, manipulative mother, returning not for reconciliation, but for theft. It was my Aunt Brenda Kent, Sylvia's older sister. A woman I hadn't spoken to in over 25 years who reached out to me. I found a voicemail from her one evening, her voice heavy with a weary familial regret. "Elena, this is your Aunt Brenda," the voice crackled. I don't expect you to call me back. I heard what happened, and I wanted to say, I'm so sorry. Not just for this, but for all of it. Sylvia, she's been like this since we were kids. She ruined our parents. She borrowed money she never repaid. She lied. She stole. When she left you and Marcus, we all knew why. She saw an easy out. She always takes the easy out. What you did, getting the police, it was the hardest thing to do. But it was the only thing. She's a black hole, Elena. Don't you ever let her pull you in. Your father, Marcus? He was a good man. You're a good woman. Her words did something I didn't expect. They didn't erase the pain, but they contextualized it. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't unlovable. I wasn't not enough. My mother's absence wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a symptom of her own character. She was, as my aunt said, a black hole. The legal battle was short. Faced with indisputable video and digital evidence, Sylvia and Leo took a plea deal. Sylvia received a suspended sentence with long-term probation, conditional on mandatory counseling and a strict, legally binding agreement to never contact me or my father again. Leo, given his active participation and the evidence from my desk, was sentenced to 6 months in county jail for his role in the attempted wire fraud. He was arrogant and sneering until the moment the judge delivered the sentence. I watched the color drain from his face as the cuffs clicked on. As for me, I had one last piece of business. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Mason, a man recommended by a colleague. He was patient. His office a calm, quiet space. "You've been in survival mode for 22 years, Elena," he told me in one of our first sessions. His voice calm but firm. "You built a fortress of logic and code to protect that 9-year-old girl. But the war is over. You don't have to live in the fortress anymore." Through months of work, I learned to unpack the trauma of her abandonment. I learned to let go of the guilt I'd felt for surviving. I realized her absence was her failure, not mine. I learned to finally, truly, mourn the mother I deserved but never had, and to let go of the ghost that was Sylvia Kent. My healing wasn't just internal. I wanted to create something tangible, something good from the wreckage. Inspired by my own journey, I founded a small charity in Austin. I funneled a part of my income into a scholarship fund, the Raise STEM Initiative, specifically to support low-income students from Michigan and Texas pursuing degrees in tech. It offered scholarships and, more importantly, mentorship, the things I'd craved growing up. Launching it felt like giving back to the girl I'd been, the one doing homework by a space heater in a greasy auto shop. My friends, my real family, rallied around me. Kara, a social worker, helped me set up the foundation. Nina, a fellow engineer, designed the website. Ryan, my neighbor, spread the word through his community network. Their support reminded me I wasn't alone. Through it all, Dad was my anchor. I flew him down to Austin, welcoming him to my apartment, the one I'd had to deep clean and reclaim as my own safe space. I watched him stand on my balcony, looking out at the glittering skyline, his calloused hands resting on the railing. "You built all this, mija," he whispered, his voice thick with pride. "No, Dad," I said, putting my hand over his. "We built this, one evening. Over dinner with him and my friends, Kara, Nina, and Ryan." I looked around the table. The conversation was loud, the laughter genuine. These people who showed up without expecting anything in return, who celebrated my wins and listened when I faltered, they were my chosen family. I realized, in a moment of profound clarity, that I had my father, I had my friends, and that was more than enough. Family isn't just blood. Sometimes blood is just a vulnerability, a security flaw waiting to be exploited. Real family is the people who choose you, who respect you, who stay. They are the ones who help you build your fortress. And then, when the war is over, they are the ones who sit with you in the garden you plant where the fortress used to be. To everyone listening to my story, thank you for sticking with me. I hope it shows you that family is what you make it, not what you're born into. Choose the people who lift you up, who see your worth. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What does family mean to you? Please share below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine.